Hey, Teddy K here for the Best Buy blog, and in this video we take a look at the DJI Neo, one of the smallest drones you can find at Best Buy, and one filled with creative potential when you put it to good use. I generally like drones, and I think they are cool, but this one in particular really spoke to me because of how approachable and adaptable it is, to the point where really you can go into flying this thing without absolutely no experience. And the main reason for that is because of all the automated modes that work with this. Now there's a lot to cover here. First and foremost is where do you fly this? How can you fly this? It is well below the 249 gram limit for getting a certification or registering your drone with the government. Now Canada's drone rules are a little different than in the US and other places. But those are the key things you need to know, is that this at 135 grams is well below that. This is a very lightweight drone, very easy to carry and take around with you, but also means you don't have to register it, nor do you have to have a pilot's license to use it. That also goes for whether you're piloting it manually or you're using any of the auto modes. You do, however, have to follow the laws. So just bear that in mind if you're around people, and certainly not around airports or areas that are restricted. DJI will allow you to fly this drone in what are considered restricted areas or areas that might not be totally allowed, but you have to then accept the liability for that. Okay, now moving on. The drone is basically your typical quadcopter, right? So it's a small device, very, very lightweight, as I mentioned. It has guards here, so there are guards that around the propellers that you'll see here too, and that's basically it. I mean, it runs on one battery, and it has a camera in the front with a gimbal that goes up and down. It's a Y-axis, right? So it only goes up and down, doesn't go side to side. I tested the Fly More combo, which includes the drone itself along with the controller and 2 extra batteries with a charging dock. I highly recommend that you go with this combo if you're going to get the Neo, mainly because of the battery life. So DJI's ratings for battery life are really hard to measure in reality, because you're not going to probably hit those numbers unless you're in the most ideal conditions, and even then it probably won't be outside. The reason why is because the stabilizers in the drone itself have to fight off, and because of the light weight, wind gusts and you know, there'll be gales of wind that will affect how the drone flies. It stays in place, don't get me wrong, it will fly, but at the same time it can teeter one way or another, right? So with that in mind, I will say though that in some cases the way the battery works does work in your favor, mainly because this is the kind of drone that is very good for small clips, short clips. A lot of the automated modes that are available do shoot that way, so they will shoot sort of based on very short kind of durations. And I'll go into some of those because they are excellent. I mean, follow, circle, droney, spotlight, rocket, direction track, all these are excellent. All of them actually are described for you in the DJI Fly app. So setting up the drone to fly is a fairly simple process, especially with the app. You'll have to download, you can download on iOS or Android. I found the iOS experience a little bit better than Android, but that will probably be fixed in time. And what happens is basically you choose a mode that you want to use. So you can choose one of those automated modes, and the drone will just stay within those parameters. You can adjust those parameters within the settings in the app as well. So you can set kind of choose a set distance, you know, things like that, whether it's a low angle, a flat angle, or a high angle. All those things are adjustable within most of those modes. Some, of course, would not be, because, you know, like rocket or spotlight might be a little different. But in any case, the idea here is that you're able to capture yourself. So you as a subject or any other subject that you've selected, the idea is to stay honed in on that person or that item, that object, whatever it may be. And it does that, and it just sort of follows the automated path while staying focused on that person or object. In fact, it's so, I mean, it's just so foolproof that you don't really need to think about how it's doing it. You just have to bear in mind of the surroundings. You know, you don't want to bump into people or have this thing crash anywhere. It's highly recommended that you don't fly this over water. I do agree with that. It is dangerous to do that. Again, this doesn't have the circuitry and some of the extras that DJI's larger drones have in terms of awareness. There's no object avoidance here, so unlike DJI's other drones and larger ones in particular, there is no object avoidance, meaning that it is not going to know that there is something in its way. particularly laterally, and certainly not behind. So if it's following you, let's say you're walking and it's following you as you're walking and there's a wall, it's not going to know that there's a wall there. It's certainly not going to know there's a person there either, right? So you want to be careful, and that's why using this drone in open spaces is generally a better idea, but you can get away with it in some, areas where people are sort of milling about, just as long as you recognize that you have it close enough to you and that it's not going to get in the way of anybody or anybody's going to tamper with it, stuff like that. I think over time what happens is that the more you fly it, the more you realize kind of what those constraints are, and you work within those, and you find that there is a lot of creativity that can come out of this thing, which is, I think, one of the major selling points here. Whether you fly it manually with a controller, which I did, which I recommend also if you want really precise controls. The controller does offer you cinematic and sports modes. This is if you want really slow kind of panning for cinematic, or if you want really fast panning for sports. These are modes that work independently of the app, so you'll get more precision in terms of how the drone flies under those conditions, whereas even though you have manual controls on the app, they are not precise. It's really jerky, and it just doesn't work the same way. So I find the app is a little better if you want to position the drone in a certain way, but not really maneuver it too much. So as I said, when it comes to being creative with the drone, whether it's the controller, whether it's the app, using automated modes, flying it yourself, whatever it is, the drone takes really, really good footage. It takes some good photos too, primarily in good lighting conditions. Right now, this is later in the day. This would probably be about the tail end of when we get really, really good shots. As the sun goes down, though, it becomes a little more difficult, and you start to notice a degradation in the image quality. You'll notice it more so at night, where images will become grainy. That's by design, I think. It's just standard, given the image sensor that is in here. But nevertheless, the sheer sort of cinematic and fluidity of the content, of the footage that this thing takes is actually very, very impressive, especially in the automated modes as well. Just the very idea that you can sort of circle around yourself, whether you're doing something or whether there's a scene that you're around, is really, really cool. And you can do this indoors too, if you have a big enough space, right? So I was at a wedding recently, and I thought about the idea of using that in there, and I didn't. But the ceiling was high enough, and it wouldn't have been dangerous in order to do it, but I opted not to. So in any case, I can't really tell you what you can create with this, because I think really that is open to interpretation. And as long as you're safe about it and you're not really endangering anybody while you're doing it, the sky really kind of is the limit, no pun intended. This drone doesn't go very high. Speaking of skies, this is not a drone that you're necessarily going to put really, just elevate to a really high altitude. There are limits. DJI sets one at about 400 or 500 meters. That is one you can only access when you fly the drone manually. The automated modes will never go that high, nor can you go that high with the app either. So again, you're going to need the controller for that, because the two communicate that way. But again, I don't know that you'd really want to go that high, simply because this is going to be more susceptible to higher wind gusts, which of course will be stronger the higher you go. Moreover, there's no social media aspect to this in terms of shooting in vertical or anything like that, despite the fact that it does shoot up and down. You'll have to crop those images or videos after the fact, but it is doable. It is something that you can do. You can take images and photos from the Fly app and look at them, but at the same time you can also do it in the DJI Neo app and make edits there, or transfer them to your software of choice to make the changes that you want to make. At the same time, you can come up with some really interesting combinations. So if you've shot footage with a phone and then you want to sort of intersperse it with footage that was caught from here, especially on whether it's you're traveling or you're putting together a project of some kind, this is the kind of footage that would be interesting to add to something like that. And certainly for me, this is something I wish I had traveled with before. I certainly would like to in the future, and I probably will. And that's my review of the DJI Neo, available at Best Buy now. You can find out more about it by just clicking that link below. For the Best Buy blog, I'm Teddy K. Thanks for watching.